All right, so we're coming back to the second part, CNS, and we're finishing it up from diencephalon then to the cerebrum, and then we're gonna do your cranial nerves. Okay, so we're gonna finish up our central nervous system. That's gonna be our continuation. Okay, let me share it again. Make sure that's the one that you have on your screen. Okay, and let me open up my pen. Okay, so we're going to go into the diencephalon now. Okay, so we're actually at the area of the diencephalon. So we came from the brainstem, now we're going to the diencephalon, and the last part is going to be the cerebrum. Okay, so the diencephalon is the structure that you see here. Okay, the purple structure is the diencephalon. We have the thalamus. The structure looks like an egg. The hypothalamus, below the thalamus, and there's going to be something here at the back called the epithalamus. Those are the three parts of your diencephalon. All right, so we looked at the midbrain, and now we're actually here at the diencephalon, okay, right here. So those two purple structures that look like X is going to be the thalamus. Okay, so we're going to be looking at your, we did the cerebellum, and now we're going to the diencephalon, okay? So it's the central core of the forebrain. Okay, remember your forebrain is made out of cerebrum and your diencephalon. It's surrounded by cerebral hemisphere, and this is the three parts of that diencephalon. So the ventricle that's associated with the diencephalon is going to be the third ventricle. So I want you to actually do again your summary. What do we see onto the diencephalon? We should be able to see the three parts. This part's here, okay? That's going to be the first one that we'll be identifying. And then we should be able to see the third ventricle at the diencephalon. Okay. All right, so for the diencephalon, okay, this is the structure of the diencephalon. Okay, so I'm going to mark it out here. And three parts is going to be the hypothalamus, right here. And then this structure looks like an egg is called the thalamus, which is enclosed by the third ventricle. So this is going to be the third ventricle. So when I see the third ventricle, you're at the diencephalon. And then the last part is going to be the structure you see here at the back. That is going to be the pineal body or pineal gland, which is part of the epithalamus. So the pineal gland is actually a hormonal gland that creates melatonin. So those are my three parts, okay? So it makes up 80% of the diencephalon, your thalamus, okay? And it has a lot of the nuclei. So when you say nuclei, it has a lot of the cell bodies that has certain functions. But the main function of that is it's acting as a relay station for incoming sensory messages, and it communicates with the cerebral cortex. Okay, so anything that, any sensory messages, okay, so this is your diencephalon, this is your cerebrum. Anything that comes out from the sensory messages will always pass through the diencephalon. And the diencephalon will direct it to the cerebrum, okay? So it's like a relay station into the cerebrum. So this is the cerebrum, and this is the diencephalon, and the one at the bottom are sensory messages from the different part of the CNS. Okay, so the afferent impulses, when you say afferent, it's sensory nerves, converts to the thalamus, then they synapse in at least one of its nuclei, okay? So that's the reason why we call it a gateway to the cerebral cortex. So it has to pass through the thalamus first before it goes to the cerebral cortex. They're organized in nuclei and amplify or tone down signals. Okay, so it amplifies tone down signals. So just remember, you have a lot of this afferent messages coming out from your environment. Okay, so if you actually let all those messages go to the cerebrum, it's going to be confusing. Okay, so what does the thalamus do? It actually tones down whatever sensory reflexes are coming into the cerebrum, or even amplify something that is coming into the cerebrum. So they won't allow anything to actually go into the cerebrum. So they actually act as a gateway. Okay, so they actually filter out anything that comes out in your environment. So when you hear something like you hear the car, you hear the siren, you hear the rain, and you actually see sunlight, you see all of this stuff going back to your brain, the thalamus filters it down, so it only concentrates the structures, the things that are important for you at that moment, okay? And that's actually what the thalamus does, okay? So if you actually are hearing the siren, the dogs, the cars, and it's going to be confusing that the cerebral cortex is going to take it in. So it will actually tone down all those environmental afferent impulses and only concentrate on the one that the cerebrum will want to concentrate, okay? Now, the thalamus is part of the diencephalon, okay? And the pineal gland is actually going to be located somewhere here, okay? So that marking is actually supposed to be the superior colliculi, so it's not actually the adequate pointer, okay? And the hypothalamus is the part that actually also controls the pituitary gland. That's one of the functions of the hypothalamus, aside from being part of the function of the brain. So in this picture, you can actually see the thalamus symmetrical on both sides. It's going to be the thalamus, okay? All right, and in between them is going to be the third ventricle. So this is going to be the third ventricle. And beside the third ventricle is going to be your hypothalamus. Okay, this is the frontal or coronal section of your brain. Okay, and whatever you have here outside, that's going to be the cerebrum. Okay, so this is the area where the thalamus is located at. Okay, it's enclosed by the cerebrum. It's inside that area. So the thalamus has a lot of this nuclei. So it's color-coded here. So it actually tells you about the different nuclei that will actually accept all of the afferent impulses. Okay, the environment will actually pass through. So I'm not going to be asking you about the different functions of each of the nuclei. I just want to show that this is where all the afferent impulses will pass through, which is the thalamus, before it actually can go into your cerebrum. Remember, these are nuclei, so these are gray matter, okay? So that structure that looks like an egg, it's made out of cell bodies. Now, the diencephalon's hypothalamus lies between the optic chiasm, which is where the optic nerve connects, and the memory bodies. So the pituitary gland projects inferiorly beneath the hypothalamus. Again, it also has a lot of the nuclei. Okay, remember, nuclei means they're cell bodies. And they're actually the one that controls main control of the visceral centers, such as your organ system. Okay, it also is the control of the master gland. The pituitary gland is considered as the master gland. The hypothalamus is considered as the master of the master gland. So the hypothalamus will secrete releasing hormone or inhibiting hormone in order to control the pituitary gland, either to release their hormone or not to release their hormone. Okay, so that is what the hypothalamus does. Now, what are the basic functions of the hypothalamus? It is the control of the autonomic nervous system. So that's actually where the function of the hypothalamus do. They control the autonomic nervous system. They also control emotional responses. They control body temperature. They control hunger and thirst sensation. They even control behavior. And they regulate sleep-wake cycles, specifically at your epithalamus, the pineal gland. They control the endocrine system. They control the pituitary gland. That in also they actually form memory. Okay, so this is a lot of things that the hypothalamus also does. Okay, now this is what it looks like inside the hypothalamus. You have these jelly bean looking structures that is located in the hypothalamus. These are nuclei, and each of these nuclei has a lot of its functions, such as your autonomic nervous system, your emotions, your behavior, and they're the one that's being controlled. They're the one that controls it here, okay, into the hypothalamus. Now, the epithalamus is the roof of the third ventricle. That is going to be the epithalamus. It consists of a tiny group of nuclei in which the pineal gland is one of them. So the only one that it actually was able to actually identify about the function is going to be the pineal gland located at your epithalamus. So they found out that that pineal gland is the one that secretes a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin aids in the control of circadian rhythm. So that's the one that tells you when to sleep and when to wake up. Okay, and that is actually what melatonin hormone does. It tells you this is sleeping time and this is waking time. Okay, and that's located at the epithalamus. Now the cerebral hemisphere now. So we finished with the diencephalon. We're now going to the cerebral hemispheres. So there's fissures that is on your cerebral hemisphere. Okay. So the fissures are deep grooves, okay? And they separate major regions of the brain. The first one is called the transverse fissure. The transverse fissure is this cut here, not a total cut, okay? But an area here that separates the cerebrum and the cerebellum. That is your transverse fissure. There's another one called the longitudinal fissure. You most likely see it more on the top view. It follows on top here of the cerebrum. Okay, that is called the longitudinal fissure. It separates the two cerebral hemispheres. Let me go forward so we can actually see what that longitudinal fissure looks like. Okay, so this is going to be the longitudinal fissure. Okay, separating the two cerebral hemispheres. All right, so we have the fissures, and then we're gonna take a look at the sulci or sulci. Sulci are just grooves in the surface of cerebral hemispheres. These are called sulci. Okay. Now, in the cerebellum, this is equivalent to the fissures or the indentations. Remember, the cerebellum also has the indentation. So these are your indentations. So instead of calling it a sulci, the sulci is actually the fissures in the cerebellum. Okay. Now the gyri in the cerebrum, these are the twisted ridges that you see on top of the cerebrum. That's called the gyri. Okay. But the one that you see on here onto the cerebellum, they don't call it a gyri, they call it a folia. So the folia is actually the elevated ridges in the cerebellum. The gyri are the elevated twisted ridges in the cerebrum. Okay, they actually are quite similar, the cerebral hemisphere and the cerebellum. That's why they call the cerebellum as a small brain. Okay, but the most important function of the cerebellum is just for equilibrium and your body movement, control of your body movement. Okay. Now, the prominent gyri and sulci are similar in all people. There's nothing different about that. Even Albert Einstein's prominent, the gyri and sulci, they actually found out there's not difference between you and him. Okay, they're the same. So it doesn't mean that he has a different brain structure compared to yours. The only difference is that you only use 10% of your brain. He used about 16% of your brain. Okay, Albert Einstein used about 16% of your brain. You only use about less than 10, about 9. Okay, so how do you develop to use more of the neurons in your brain? So when you use the neurons in your brain, that is actually because you study. when you read, when you study, you add information to your brain. Now, the neurons that are not communicating now is going to communicate, okay? And that's how you recruit those neurons in order for you to increase the amount of information, the amount of neurons that will participate in memory, okay? So that's the reason why a lot of people are having a hard time studying at this point, because they haven't actually recruited some of the neurons that are just sitting inside your brain. So the way to recruit it is to actually read and study. That's why when you go to your nursing program, you'll actually realize that it's easier to memorize at that point, because you've been using your brain so much that you actually recruited some of the neurons. So it'll take a while. So if you're not reading, you're not getting that information, that means that your neurons is not going to actually receive that information. They're not going to communicate. That memory is going to get lost. So it's not going to be worth it, okay? So whenever you actually go to your career, I want you to actually read and absorb information, because by doing that, you're recruiting your neurons, increasing the amount of percentage in your brain, the neurons, okay? I think you have a movie back then that's called Lucy. Lucy was using about 90% of the brain, okay? So if you actually saw that movie, it means that if somebody can actually use 90% of their brain, that's what the movie Lucy was, okay? So just remember that. The same convolutions, soul size, we have the same ones with Albert Einstein and everybody, except that the amount of neurons that you utilize is not that much if you don't utilize your brain in trying to get information at your brain, okay? So that's the reason why keep on studying, keep on actually going through your programs and courses, because that will actually make your neurons recruit more of it on your brain, okay? So now, what are the different lobes of the cerebral hemispheres? So this part here on the red one, okay, this is called the frontal lobe. The one here on dark blue, on the medium blue, that is going to be your parietal lobe. And the one here at the back, and it's going to be your occipital lobe. And here, dark blue, is going to be the temporal lobe. Each lobe has a function. The frontal lobe is more in the behavior, okay? The parietal lobe is actually associated with this gyrus, okay? So remember, there's a sulcus that divides the frontal and the parietal lobes. That is going to be called the central sulcus, okay? So whatever gyrus is in front of it, this is called the gyrus located at the frontal lobe. That is called the precentral gyrus. The precentral gyrus controls motor, meaning motor nerves. That's the one that moves your muscle. The postcentral gyrus located at the parietal lobe after the central sulcus, this is called sensory, okay? Sensory. So anything that is movement of muscle is going to be at the precentral gyrus. Anything that's sensory is going to be at the postcentral gyrus. Now, if somebody have a stroke is killing the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus. So when you kill the pre and the postcentral gyrus, that's the reason we have hemiplegia, paralysis on one side of your body, because you're killing off those gyrus that handles all of those movement and sensory, okay? So that's actually the consequence of a stroke, right? So we're going to be looking now. I gave you the precentral gyrus. I gave you the lobes, okay? And I gave you the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus. So that's very significant on identifying what they are for. Precentral is motor. Postcentral is your sensory, okay? So there is actually this central sulcus with the precentral gyrus, postcentral gyrus, and then there's a imaginary line between the parietal and occipital lobe. That's going to be called the parietal occipital sulcus. Then this is the lateral sulcus, separating the temporal from the frontal and the parietal. That's called the lateral sulcus, okay? And again, I mentioned the transverse cerebral fissure, separating the cerebellum and the cerebrum, okay? And those are the different structures of the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, parietal occipital sulcus, we mentioned that. Lateral sulcus. The insula is within this area here, okay? That is within the deep lateral sulcus, okay? So we're gonna take a look at that insula later on, okay? All right, so now we have a lot of structures that are actually located here on the longinal structure cut of the cerebrum, okay? So this is gonna be the basic model that you're gonna be looking at when we study the lab, the models, okay? So here is gonna be the central sulcus of the cerebrum. So here's gonna be the precentral gyrus. Here is gonna be the postcentral gyrus. And all of this here is the frontal lobe, and all of this here is the parietal lobe. And this is going to be the parietal occipital sulcus, and this is going to be the occipital lobe. And then we have gyruses are located here, okay? So the first one, this is part of the cerebrum. The corpus callosum is the roof. This is inside here is the lateral ventricle, okay? Lateral ventricle is part of the cerebrum. The lateral ventricle inside there is going to be the lateral ventricle. But remember, it's covered by skin called the septum pellucidum right now. It's covered by skin called the septum pellucidum. But inside there is going to be the lateral ventricle. So the roof of the lateral ventricle is called the corpus callosum. This one connects the left and right cerebral hemisphere. So they communicate. Okay, that is actually the only space that they actually communicate, the corpus callosum, right? Then the gyrus on top of that, we call it cingulate gyrus. And the gyrus below all of this is called the parahippocampal gyrus. And this one that curves in is called the uncus, okay? Which is located the inner side of the temporal lobe. Okay, that's actually where it is. All right, then, okay, so the cerebral hemisphere through a frontal section, okay, we see the cerebral cortex. That's the gray matter that you see outside. All this gray matter is made out of cell bodies, okay? Remember, we saw the spinal cord, in which it has gray matter in the middle and white matter outside. Once you go higher, it's gonna have gray matter in the middle, some gray to the side, and white matter outside and gray matter on the exterior. And this is called the cerebral cortex, okay? This is the brain. That's all the functions you have on the brain. Remember, these are made of cell bodies. And the structures that you see in between, that is called the cerebral white matter. And some of the deep gray matter, okay, the structure here is called the basal ganglia. That's part of the cerebrum. That's the deep gray matter. It's a gray matter. Even it's called red, it's a gray matter, okay? That's called the basal ganglia. So what are the different parts of the basal ganglia? Okay, it's going to be your C, caudate nucleus, okay? And then G, globus pallidus, and P, I'm not saying a bad word here, putamen, and then C is called colostrum. So what are the four structures of the basal ganglia of the cerebrum? It's called CGPC, okay? Caudate nucleus, globus pallidus, putamen, and the colostrum. That is called the basal ganglia. That's the deep gray matter of the cerebrum, okay? All right, so now we've actually seen the gray matter, okay? The different parts here of the basal ganglia. We saw the cerebral cortex, the outer gray of the cerebrum. And then these are white matter. And the top portion of this part here is called the corpus callosum, connecting the left and the right cerebral hemisphere. And this is going to be the lateral ventricles. So the lateral ventricles connect into the third ventricle. So the lateral ventricles flows into the third ventricle. Okay, so that's actually the flow of the cerebral ventricles. So the cerebral cortex is a home of our conscious mind. Okay? That's actually where the conscious mind is. That makes it aware of ourselves and our sensation, initiate and control voluntary movements such as the precentral gyrus. They also communicate, remember, and understand. Okay, so the different gyruses. That's actually the one that's very important about memory. The hippocampus. Okay, so the hippocampus is actually more on the memory, right? So we have different areas of the brain. Okay, it means how to folds in the cortex to triple its size. Okay. But I'm not going to ask you to map the brain. The brain has already been mapped, okay? So there's actually areas there that we actually have distinct areas that we already mapped what's the function of that cerebrum. So if I go forward, okay, this is the map of the brain, okay? So anything about taste is located here in the cerebral cortex of the cerebrum. That is in the insula. So that's the reason why the insula is actually important for taste. So whenever you taste something, it goes and distributed at the area of the insula, of the cerebrum. Okay. So remember, everything has to go through the thalamus first, and then from the thalamus it radiates to the cerebral cortex. So taste is located here at the insula. So anything here is the occipital lobe. Okay, located at the occipital lobe, that is called the primary visual cortex. So the vision that you see in your eye is actually processed at the back of your head, the occipital lobe. The eye does not give you the image. You're actually seeing the image at the occipital lobe. Now, hearing is located here at area 42. That is at the area of the temporal lobe. Okay, so on. So you got a lot of places here that can actually produce what we call the consciousness of the body, and the body's awareness. Motor control is here. Movement of your arm, your legs, located at the precentral gyrus. We call it the primary motor cortex. Sensory of the body, like somebody pinches you in the arm to the leg, that is controlled by the primary somatosensory cortex. Then we have here is going to be the Broca's area, which is about speech, and the Wernicke's. So speech is actually located in that area. I'm not going to ask you to map it. I just showed you that the cerebral cortex has already been divided on what is their function. Okay. So now, let me finish up with this one. Okay. So we're actually done here. We're not going to go forward on the other parts. Okay. So we're done on that area. So we're not going to go further on the other parts, which is going to be this PowerPoint that further goes down into the different parts of the cerebrum. So this is going to be the area that is not going to be part of the exam. Okay, this is more on your physiology. And this is what it looks like on that. This is what they call a homunculus. Okay, as a part of the whole central gyrus that controls specific areas of the body for sensation. So motor is the same thing. Okay, you're going to do exercise on the physiology about testing the different regions of the brain for sensory. Okay, now let me actually just finish you with this one. Okay, so there was actually something that I learned out from neurology when I look at the map of the brain. Okay, so there's actually something that is really important because I was wondering why people can memorize easily compared to the other people that they could not memorize easily. Okay, so what were they actually utilizing? Okay, they're actually utilizing the regions of the brain. Okay, so example, this is the visual cortex. Okay, that's where vision is. So when I see something, it's being processed that area called number 17. But I notice it has number 19. And what is 19 is called visual association area. Okay, so why does vision have an association area? So I was wondering that when I was looking at that in neurology. There's another one, hearing. Hearing is going to be the primary auditory cortex is located here at the area 41. Okay, that's for hearing. Now I noticed that it also has an association area, number 42. So there's a lot of things that our senses always have an association area. So I was wondering, what is that association area for? Okay, it's such as this. You got the somatosensory association area. So when you sense something, there's an association area there. Okay, so I was wondering what it is for. So I just realized that that's how memory works, association. So if I want to actually remember something, I gotta associate it with something that's actually related to that memory. Okay, so I told you about the story about the key. So whenever you at night you drop your key on a certain place, the next day you actually say, "Where's the key?" You couldn't remember where you placed the key. Why? You did not associate it. So now when you look at the key next day, okay, if you drop your key again, make sure you associate to a structure so you can understand where you place the key. So next day you're gonna still do the same thing. Where's the key? Then suddenly you associate with the mouse of your computer. So that's how memory is recalled. Okay. So even for hearing, why do we actually, when we study, why do we shout out loud the information? And that's actually to associate. And also for smell, okay? Sometimes we actually associate that information with smell because whenever we smell something, it actually reminds that, it triggers a memory, such as that smells like the perfume of my boyfriend, okay? And that was 15 years ago. So that is called association. Now, the brain works the same way. Why is it that whenever I talk about anatomy, number one, I put a landmark. Number two, I put mnemonics because that's how I memorize anatomy. And that's the survival of the fittest. So if you don't still use your brain to memorize, you're gonna lose out, okay? Because you're gonna have a hard time going to the nursing program or to med school. So I'm telling you right now, whenever you listen, that's why sometimes, you take for granted that when I lecture you, you take for granted about the information I'm giving it to you. Okay, so you probably miss a couple of my lectures, and you'd actually say, "I didn't hear any association." All the structures in my anatomy lecture have association. Okay, all the structures in my anatomy has an association. So we talk about the different kinds of association in the tissues. I don't think you remember about the loose areolar connective tissue. I associate with the spider webs at the corner of your house. And that's how you remember how to look at it. I don't know if you actually remember that. I told you that the hiding cartilage looks like boats in Catalina Beach. Okay, that's hiding cartilage. And what's the difference between that and your uh, elastic cartilage? It's the same thing. It's a beach, but it's in Santa Monica Beach because there's a lot of seaweeds and there's a lot of elastic fibers there. Okay, and then the fiber cartilage is associated with Long Beach because you have collagen that looks like oil spills. Okay, so that's actually the technique that I want you to actually know. And if you miss that, you just wasted your time in class because those are the things that I actually did when I was studying in mid school. And I realized that my brain has to find a way to memorize stuff. And that is called association. Okay. So I hope you actually get into information about association because that is the trick about studying the science, nursing, and the medical field. Okay. All right, so we finished with the central nervous system, and now we're going to the last part, and that's going to be the cranial nerves. Okay, and remember, so I don't know if you remember the association to the carpal bones. Okay, so if you don't remember that, remember I told you Sally left the part. Sally left the party to take Carmen home. Okay, that's an association. Okay, so I hope you actually still remember it. So those are the things that we actually use in the mid school in order for you uh, to remember. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share to you the cranial nerves now. Okay. So it's a simple lecture all about cranial nerves. And the cranial nerves is just trying to know to you, tell you that the 12 cranial nerves in your body, in your brain. Cranial nerves are nerves that exit out from your body. Okay, and there's 12 of them, so we're gonna actually take a look at the function of each of the cranial nerves. Again, there's gonna be a lot of association here. So if you actually are going to be listening to this video, you're going to see that this is how to actually get into that the information about the cranial nerves. Okay, so let me see why am I not opening here. Okay, so let me actually figure out what's happening here with my thing. All right, so let me actually share it again. That's going to be cranial nerves. Okay. Okay, so I think I need to click on something before it actually goes to your screen. Okay, so I don't know what's happening here, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing myself in you on the screen. All right, I think we're okay. So I'm gonna open it up again and share to you the screen. Okay. All right, so what we have right now is actually gonna be your the cranial nerves. Okay, so let's start here. Remember, this is actually now peripheral nervous system. We're not at CNS anymore. This is called the peripheral nervous system. The next day, we're going to do your spinal nerves, autonomic nervous system. Okay, and that's part of the peripheral nervous system. So I'm going to use my pen, be able to write on it. Okay. So just remember, we need to know the name of the cranial nerve, the Roman number of the cranial nerve, and that's actually the information that we need to actually go through here. This is a short PowerPoint about the cranial nerves. We got cranial nerves 1 to 12. Okay, so it's easy to do 1, 2, 3, but 4, 5, and 6. Just remember, this is 5. Okay, 5 minus 1 is 4. 5 plus 1 is 6. Then just added those 6, 7, 8, and then how's the 9, 10, 11? 10 is X. 10 minus 1 is 9. 10 plus 1 is 11. Then just add 6. That's 12. We got 12 cranial nerves 1 to 12. Okay, so the cranial nerves that are attached to the forebrain is only cranial nerves 1 to 2. The rest is attached at the brainstem. Okay, again, this is one of the questions I'm going to be asking in your exam, theoretical. I already lectured about this. Okay, I told you what cranial nerves are associated with what part of the brain. So, what does the midbrain have? What cranial nerve? Okay, recall cranial nerves 3 and 4. Okay, that's the midbrain. What does the pons have? Pons have cranial nerves 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so what does the medulla have? The medulla is cranial nerves 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. This is the question on the exam, okay? So I know this is actually the question I'm going to be asking you, okay? So another question I wanted you to look at, okay? So 1 and 2 was actually the forebrain. Forebrain is made out of your cerebrum and your diencephalon. Cranial nerves 1 and 2, okay? So again, what is at the forebrain? Specifically the cerebrum. What is the ventricle? That's called the lateral ventricle. Okay. What is located at the diencephalon? Okay. The diencephalon is the third ventricle. Okay. What is located at the midbrain? The cerebral aqueduct. What is located at the pons and the medulla? That's going to be the fourth ventricle. Okay. All right. Okay. So now, another question on the exam. Where's the pyramidal decussation? Where's the pyramid? Where's the olive? Where's the pontine nuclei? Where is the thalamus? Where's the hypothalamus? Where is the epithalamus? Where is the basal ganglia? Where is the substantia nigra? Okay, and where are your superior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, inferior cerebellar peduncle? Where's the corpora quadrigemini? Where is the superior colliculi? Where's the inferior colliculi? Okay, those are the ones that I asked you to actually run down and summarize when we went through the different parts of the brain. Okay, so that's going to be the questions on the exam, right? So we'll take a look now at the cranial nerves now. Okay, this is going to be part of the lab exam. I'm going to ask you the name of the nerves. Okay, located at the inferior portion of the brain. Okay, so the way to look at it is, again, okay, this is going to be another landmark that I'm going to be teaching you. Remember, we took the landmark of the facial muscles like a clock, okay? I hope you actually still remember it. I put 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock, okay? And I identified the muscles that are located in that clock. I'm going to do the same thing here, okay? But I'm going to do 2 clocks here. So the first one is going to be the first clock. Olfactory bulb is your cranial nerve 1. But remember, this is not the nerve. The nerve is the one that goes down from the olfactory bulb. Olfactory bulb is cranial nerve 1. Okay, cranial nerve 1 is olfactory nerve. Okay, then after that, I have this nerve here called the optic nerve. That is the nerve itself. Okay, the optic nerve is actually cranial nerve 2. And remember, it becomes a chiasm, and then they become a tract. Olfactory bulb also becomes a tract. Tract means it's going to bring it somewhere else. Okay, so this is smell. Okay, so you're going to bring it into the area between the temporal and the frontal bone, which is going to be the area of that location where they are being processed. Optic tract, they're going to bring it to the occipital lobe, okay, where this vision is going to be processed, okay? So now this is my other clock, okay? I got cranial nerves 3, 4, and 5. Trigeminal is the biggest nerve, okay? And then this is another clock. Cranial nerve 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the 12th one is in the front, okay? That's cranial nerve 12. And again, you got to memorize what's the name of each of those nerves, okay? We'll go through it on this PowerPoint. So this is going to be, the main thing that you need to know about this is what is the function of that cranial nerve and what hole do they come from, okay? So those are the things that I need you to know. What hole do they actually enter in the skull? We studied those holes before, the foramen rotundum, foramen ovale, the optic canal, the superior orbital fissure, inferior orbital fissure. That's the reason why we went through that on the bone, okay? I want you to know what are the holes where these nerves will actually pass through. And then after that is, what is the function of the cranial nerve? Cranial nerve 1, smell. This is the olfactory bulb, and that's going to be the olfactory tract. The nerve is the one that goes down here to go to the superior part of the nasal cavity. So that's going to be the olfactory nerve. As I said, the bulb's not a nerve. The bulb is actually where the ganglion is located at, in which the nerve descends down into that nasal cavity. That is going to be called the olfactory nerve. Okay, what hole do they penetrate? This holes in which olfactory nerve pass by is called the the cribriform foramina. Okay, cribriform foramina is actually where the cribriform plate is located at, to the side of the crista galli. Okay, so it's called the cribriform foramina, right? So this was actually the part when we studied the muscle. I mean the bone. Okay, so the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. Okay, so I hope that actually gave you a recall on where that one is. Now, that's finished with cranial nerve 1, smell, cribriform foramina. Cranial nerve 2, optic nerve is vision. Okay, what hole? Optic canal. Okay, so the hole where they pass through is called the optic canal. So the nerve comes from the eyeball, the retina, and then they actually go to the olfactory. This is the optic nerve, and they become a chiasma or a chiasm. And then after the chiasm become a tract. The tract attaches to this nucleus called the lateral geniculate nucleus, and then they form what we call radiation. So the radiation now is going into the occipital lobe, where visual cortex is located at. Okay, so the whole is going to be the optic canal. That's where the optic nerve enters. Okay, the optic canal is a hole, and the function is vision. Okay, so I'm gonna go to 3, 4, and 6. Okay, why did I do 3, 4, and 6, not 3, 4, 5, and 6? Because 3, 4, and 6 are nerves that handles what we call EOMs. It's called extraocular movement. What is extraocular movement? Ocular means eye. So there are muscles located outside the eye. They're the one that makes your eye look to the left, to the right, up, down, and in angles. Okay, those are the muscles that are located here. Now, there's a lot of muscles there. Okay, so again, take a look at that muscle again. Remember, we studied this on the part of the muscle. Okay, so this is the nose. This is the ear. So my eyes, if I see on above, that muscle that will bring it up is going to be called superior rectus. Okay, the superior rectus. Okay, so let me actually excuse myself so I can actually just tell the people here to. Okay, thank you. I just have a couple of people here that was actually talking. I couldn't hear myself. Okay, so the muscle that pulling your eye up is called superior rectus. Rectus means muscle that are straight. The muscle that actually pulls the eye down, making you look down, is going to be the inferior rectus muscle. Okay, now if the eye looks to the left, this eye goes to the left also. The muscle that makes the left eye goes to the left is called your lateral rectus. Lateral rectus. But the right eye that moves to the left is called the medial rectus. And then the eye that looks to the right, both of them looks to the right muscle is going to be the lateral rectus muscle. And the left muscle, the left eye is going to be the medial rectus muscle. Okay? And then there's muscle that goes in angles. Okay? So the muscle that goes in angle is going to be the superior oblique here and the inferior oblique here. And then here is going to be the inferior oblique here and the superior oblique here. Okay? 6 muscles. 6 rectus muscle. Superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus, superior oblique, and inferior oblique. Okay? which nerve innervates specific muscle. Okay, so that's actually the reason why I'm telling you right now. Okay, your brain has to find a way to memorize them. Okay, so I'll give you an example. When I was in the med school, I was trying to actually take my license to for that exam. So I said to myself, uh, this question is going to be just probably 4 questions, 2 or 4 questions on the licensing exam. Okay, so I said to myself, should I take time to memorize it? Because it's only 4 questions, and our question is about probably 600 to 800 questions. So I was thinking myself, should I spend time trying to memorize what exact nerve is exactly innervating the exact muscle? So I look at it and said, I should do it. Okay. So how did I do it? La Rasot. Then what is La Rasot? Okay. So all the muscles that are located here, I can know their nerve innervation by looking at La Rasot O. Okay. What is La Rasot? Lateral rectus is innervated by abducens nerve. Number 6. Superior oblique is innervated by the trochlear. Number 4. Oculomotor is 3. Is anything that is not on this mnemonics. Remember, EOMs is 3, 4, and 6. Okay? So if I run it down, what is the nerve, the cranial nerve that innervates the superior rectus? Superior rectus, SR. Nope. Nope. Oculomotor. Inferior rectus. Not here. Not here. Oculomotor. Medial rectus. Not here. Not here. Oculomotor. Lateral rectus. Yes, lateral rectus here. Abducens. Superior oblique. Superior oblique is here. Your trochlear, number 4. Inferior oblique. Not here. Not here. Oculomotor. And that's how I was able to answer 16 questions out from this information on the licensing exam. Okay, so I actually was happy that I took time in order to actually understand this cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6. Okay, so that's an EOM, extraocular movement. Okay, so now I'm going to take a look at what are the functions. Oculomotor, as I said, are the muscles of the EOMs that are not within this mnemonics. Okay, so it's going to be superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, okay, and your inferior oblique. That's oculomotor. Now, what else does the oculomotor do? It actually is the one that makes your eyebrow, I mean, not your eyebrow, your uh, upper eyelid close, like winking, okay? That's the levator palpebrae muscle. So it makes it close, levator palpebrae muscle. That's also cranial nerve 3, okay? Then cranial nerve 3, that's one that actually produces what we call pupillary constriction. When I shine a light to your eye, pupillary constriction. When I shine a light in your eye, your pupils constrict, so that actually the hole becomes smaller, okay? Because the light actually can burn the retina inside, so it's trying to actually control the amount of light going in. Such as if you see, if you look at the sun, you know, your pupils is going to constrict because it's trying to actually prevent the retina from being burned by the sunlight. Okay, so those are the extra function of the number 3, oculomotor nerve. Okay, pupillary constriction and levator palpebrae muscle innervation together with the EOMs. Okay, and what hole does it come from? EOMs. SOF, superior orbital fissure. So it came out from the superior orbital fissure. Okay, I'm going to go to number 4, trochlear nerve. Okay, again, trochlear nerve was innervating your superior oblique. Okay, La Rasot, superior oblique. Okay, trochlear. What hole does it actually go through? Another one, SOF, superior orbital fissure. Okay, I'm going to jump to number 6. Number 6 is your trochlear, your abducens. Okay, so abducens is innervating the lateral rectus. Remember, La Rasot, lateral rectus abducens. So what hole does it come from? It actually comes out from, again, the SOF, superior orbital fissure. Okay, so that's actually the commonality. 3, 4, and 6 came from the superior orbital fissure. And later on, we're going to go to number 5, which is trigeminal. And remember, what was trigeminal? Is the mastication muscle, okay? The chewing muscle. It also came out from number SOF, okay? So this is trigeminal nerve, provides innervation to the face. So that's the one that provides a sensation to your face, sensory of your face, and the chewing muscle. So it has sensory and motor. So what is the innervation of the face? So if I put a needle here on the area here, it's going to sense by the trigeminal nerve. If I put it on your cheek, a needle, it's going to sense by the trigeminal nerve. And if I put a needle on the mandible area of the skin, it's going to be sensed by the trigeminal nerve, because that is for sensation of the face, okay? But aside from sensation of the face, it also actually produces what we call chewing muscle innervation. That's the chewing muscle innervation. Cranial nerve 5, okay? Trigeminal nerve. It innervates the masseter, the temporalis muscle, and the pterygoid muscle. That's for the muscle of chewing, okay? So I want to know what hole do these nerves passes through, okay? What hole do they come from? The first one is going to be the SOF. So they actually came also from the SOF. But again, there's other holes that they actually pass through also, because they actually go to the different parts of the face for sensory. Now we have here the rotundum, the ovale. Those are the holes that we studied. So the rotundum ovale are the holes that the nerve will pass through. We have the mandibular foramen, we studied that. We have the mental foramen, we studied that. We have the intraorbital foramen and the supraorbital foramen. So those were the nerves that we studied in the skull on the first part of our class. So cranial nerve 5 passes through those holes, specifically at the SOF. So now I know that 3, 4, 5, and 6 comes out from the SOF, okay? So if I ask you the exam, which of the following nerve is not passing through the SOF? 3, 4, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 does not come from the SOF, okay? So we finished with 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we go into number 7, facial nerve. And that's for facial expression. That's for innervation of the facial muscles, okay? So specifically, where do they pass through? They actually came from the internal acoustic meatus. Internal acoustic meatus. Okay? Now, going to 8, vestibulocochlear nerve. It's not the auditory nerve because vestibulocochlear means equilibrium and your hearing. So that's the function. What hole do they come from? Again, internal acoustic meatus. 7 and 8 is internal acoustic meatus. Then 3, 4, 5, and 6 is your SOF, superior orbital fissure. Okay, let's take a look at 9. What is 9? Glossopharyngeal nerve. The glossopharyngeal nerve is the one that actually stimulates the structures of the tongue and the pharynx. Okay, tongue and the pharynx. So you're going to have the parotid gland, okay, and there's other things that it will actually do. It actually is the one that stimulates your gag reflex. So if I put a tongue depressor and push it to the back of your mouth, you're going to gag. That's handled by the glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, so what hole do they pass through? Jugular foramen. Okay, that's 9. 10, vagus nerve. That's the nerve that actually exits out again at the jugular foramen, but instead of actually just going to the neck, they actually go to the thoracic, to the abdominal, and to the pelvic. That's why we call it wandering nerve, because instead of just staying in the neck, it actually goes down into the different cavities of the body. Okay, so that's how far it is. Excuse me. And then later on, you're going to see it's actually part of the parasympathetic nervous system. That's number 10, vagus. Okay. 11, your accessory nerve. Okay. Your accessory nerve pass out from the jugular foramen again. Okay. So it comes out from the jugular foramen, but remember, it has the reason why we call it accessory nerve because it has some spinal nerve contributing to that nerve, and also cranial nerve 10 contributes to that nerve. That's the reason why we call it accessory part of the vagus nerve. So spinal nerve also gives contribution to that nerve. Okay, and what is the function of this? Innervates the trapezius muscle and the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Okay, that's the nerve innervation of the two. Okay, so again, what was a hole? It is called the jugular foramen. Okay, so foramen, jugular foramen. So was jugular foramen is actually number 9, 10, and 11. And the last nerve is going to be the hypoglossal nerve for tongue movement. Okay, and what hole does it go through? It has its own. We call it the hypoglossal canal. The hypoglossal canal. Okay. All right. So before we go to the lab, okay, let me actually tell you what we use this information for. Okay. So whenever we do a physical exam on a patient, we also do a neurologic exam on the patient. So how do I use this neurologic exam on the patient? Remember, whenever we have somebody with a brain disorder, okay, we want to know what part of the brain has the deficiency. Remember, we know that part of the brain is going to be your cerebrum, diencephalon, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and your cerebellum. Okay, so I want to know without using MRI, without using an MRI or without using a CT scan. I want to know what part of the brain is deficient by doing a neurologic exam, okay? Because I want to check out all the cranial nerves, okay? So number 1, cranial nerve 1 is for smell. That's at the cerebrum. So I'm going to ask the patient if they can actually distinguish vanilla and chocolate. If they can actually distinguish them, then cranial nerve 1 is intact, okay? Cranial nerve 2, I'm going to ask the patient to look at the Snellen's chart, see the letters. If they can actually determine the letters and look at the colors, then cranial nerve 2 is intact, okay? So what does that mean? I did cranial 1, cranial nerve 2, everything's intact. So it's actually just telling me, hey, cerebrum and diencephalon, hey, we're okay here. There's nothing wrong with us, okay? And that's the reason why we associate the cranial nerve to the part of the brain. And we associate the cranial nerve to the function, so when we check them out, we can actually know what's wrong with this person, okay? So that's the thing that you want to actually know about the cranial nerve. It is actually a tool that we use whenever we want to check the structure of the brain, if they're intact or not, without even using MRI or a CT scan, okay? So I want to check for cranial nerves 3 and 4, okay? So it's usually 3, 4, and 6 because remember that's eye movement. But if I use 3, 4, and 6 and everything's intact, okay, then I would know 3 and 4 is handled by the midbrain. So if 3 and 4 is okay, that means the midbrain is telling me, hey, I'm okay here. Nothing's wrong with me. How do I check 3, 4, and 6? I'm going to ask the patient to look at my finger. So I'm going to ask the patient to follow my finger and follow with his eyes. Okay, I'm checking the superior rectus, the inferior rectus. I'm checking the right eye's lateral rectus, the left eye's medial rectus. I'm checking the left eye lateral rectus and the right eye medial rectus. And I'm checking for superior oblique, inferior oblique, superior oblique, inferior oblique. Okay, so when everything's intact, it means the eye is actually following my finger. Everything's normal. It's just telling me 3, 4 is intact. Midbrain is telling me I'm okay. Okay. So what is 6? 6 is actually under number pons. Pons is 5, 6, and 7. Right? Remember, pons is 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to check for the person for the cranial nerve 5. I'm going to ask the person if they can feel this. Because 5 is sensory of the face. If they can feel it, then cranial nerve 5 is intact. I'm going to ask another thing for the patient. Close your mouth. Then I want to see if the patient can close the mouth really well. So that is for mastication. So it means 5 is intact. Okay. I'm going to do 6 I did with the eye movement. Okay. So remember, 6 is your abducens. So it's your lateral rectus I'm checking out. And then after that, you got the number 7, facial nerve. What is facial nerve? That is going to be, can you smile? Can you raise your eyebrow? Okay. So those are checking the cranial nerve 7. So remember, I just checked 5, 6, and 7. Where does 5, 6, and 7 belong? The pons. So if everything is intact in the pons saying, hey, I'm okay. You don't need an MRI. You went through the test. I did it well. Okay. So I don't need an MRI. Okay. I just do a neurologic exam. So the last one is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 8, hearing test. 9, gag reflex. 10, I'm going to listen to your intestinal tract. I'm going to see if you're salivating on your mouth. That's for 10. 11, I'm going to ask you to lift your shoulder and turn your head, trapezius and sternocleidomastoid innervation. And then 12, I'm going to ask you to stick out your tongue. Should be symmetrical. So if 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is intact, medulla oblongata is saying, I'm okay. And that's what we study here, which is the cranial nerve and the central nervous system. Okay. All right. So that's going to be the information about cranial nerve. Okay. So I'm going to actually just do some of the models first. Okay. So I'm going to put up the model for the nervous system first. And then we're going to do a little bit of a summary of the cranial nerve. So I'm going to do the nervous system models. And then I'm going to do the cranial nerve summary. And then after this, I hope that you guys have the time to actually answer the nervous system lab exercise that is located at the date today, okay, which is going to be cranial nerve, central nervous system, and cranial nerve. Okay. So I'm going to turn it on. So I'm going to reshare it. So I want to be sure that that's one that you have on the screen. Okay. So these are the models of the cranial nerve. Okay. So I should be able to actually write on it. Okay. Turn on my pen. Okay. So I should be able to see the word right. Okay. All right. So this is going to be the central nervous system. Okay. So this is my cerebellum. And these are the lobes of my cerebrum, okay? So first identify this area here. It's actually like a cut. It doesn't stop. It goes straight from the top to the bottom. The other parts here, the sulcus, it actually stops here. So it's not usable. There, it doesn't stop here. It actually is not usable. So this one continues on from the top to the bottom. I'm going to call it the central sulcus. The central sulcus, in front of that is a gyrus of the frontal lobe. That's called precentral gyrus. That is motor. And then the gyrus located at the back of the central sulcus is called the postcentral gyrus. That is called sensory. And then this part is the parietal. This part is the occipital. This part is the temporal. And this part is the frontal. Okay. And then the lateral cerebral sulcus, or what we call the lateral sulcus, this part here, that is going to be the one that separates the lateral of the temporal lobe with the frontal of the parietal. And then remember the fissure that separates the cerebellum and the cerebrum, that is called your transverse fissure. Right? Okay, so every nervous system anatomy, this is always the models that we actually use to check you for understanding about the nervous system, the central nervous system. It's a longitudinal cut of the brain, okay? So I'm going to start here, okay, and identify structures that are located at the cerebrum. This part here, okay, I'm going to start here. Inside here, okay, is called the lateral ventricle. So it's actually covered by the skin, lateral ventricle. It's filled with cerebrospinal fluid. It's covered by skin, and the skin is called septum pellucidum. Okay, so it prevents the mixture of the left and right lateral ventricle. And then the roof of the lateral ventricle is called the corpus callosum. Okay, the corpus callosum. The floor of the lateral ventricle is called the fornix. Okay, so those are the structures I want to identify here. I'm finished with the structures at the cerebrum. I'm going to go here at the area of the thalamus and hypothalamus and epithalamus, or what we call the diencephalon. So here is going to be the thalamus, the structure that looks like an egg in the middle. That's called the thalamus. Okay, and the part here in the bottom, that is called the hypothalamus. And then the area that you see at the back here, that is going to be called the pineal gland, which is part of the epithalamus. Those are the three parts of your diencephalon. Okay, and the ventricle, because remember, this is the lateral ventricle. It's going to meet here, and this part here, okay, we're going to color it as dark. Okay, this part here is going to be the third ventricle. And remember, inside here is the lateral ventricle. So the fluid flows from the lateral ventricle to the third ventricle. And then after the third ventricle, it goes here. Okay, it becomes thin. Why? Because this area is called the midbrain. So what ventricle is in the midbrain? That is going to be the cerebral aqueduct. Okay, so remember, we actually memorize the different ventricles on the different parts of the brain. The cerebral aqueduct. Okay, I want to actually identify the different parts of the midbrain. The one in the front here. I'm going to change it to another color. The structure you see in the front here, this is called your cerebral peduncle. Okay, that's actually the cerebral peduncle of the midbrain. And the structure you see here at the back of the midbrain, that's going to be these two structures summarized as the corpora quadrigemini. Okay, and then the top part is the superior colliculus, and the one at the bottom is the inferior colliculus. Okay, so I'm finished with the midbrain. I'm going down here. It continues on to the fourth ventricle. And what are the components of the fourth ventricle? The cerebellum, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. That's the components of the fourth ventricle. Okay, so after the fourth ventricle, it goes down as the spinal cord, which is going to be the central canal. Okay, so that's how the fluid flows of the CSF. Okay, so what is that white matter located here? Okay, those white matters are called the arbor vitae. Okay, so if I ask you what specific structure am I pointing at, don't say cerebellum. It's the arbor vitae, the white matter there. Okay, because if you actually if I point something here, so what is this structure? Don't ever say that's the brain. Okay, everything's the brain. But the specific structure I'm pointing at is the corpus callosum. The specific structure, when I say what specific structure am I pointing at? The arbor vitae, not the cerebellum. Okay. All right, so those are the different structures there. Okay, now this picture, I'm looking at it to the side, and it's the medulla oblongata. That is called the olive of the medulla. Okay, the green structure is the olive of the medulla. Okay, again, the same thing that we actually looked at is going to be the same structures here. Corpus callosum, okay, fornix, septum pellucidum inside the lateral ventricle, and then you have the the gyres here is called the cingulate gyres. And then here's going to be the thalamus, hypothalamus, and the pineal gland, which is the epithalamus. Okay. And then here's going to be the cerebral peduncle of the midbrain, and the superior colliculi, inferior colliculi of the corpora quadrigemini of the midbrain. And this is going to be the third ventricle of the diencephalon. This is now the cerebral aqueduct of the midbrain. And then this part here now is the fourth ventricle of the pons medulla and the cerebellum. Okay, pons medulla and cerebellum. So this part of the pons is called the pontine nuclei. Okay, so that's going to be your pontine nuclei. And then this is going to be, this is a pons, this is going to be the medulla oblongata, and this is the cerebellum, and a specific structure there is called the arbor vitae, tree, vital tree. Arbor means tree. Does it look like the branches of the tree? Okay, so I'm finished with this one. Okay, now this one, the red structure is actually going to be the brainstem. The brainstem is the midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata. So in this picture here, that is the brainstem. Okay, again, the same identification is always like this for the nervous. Corpus callosum, septum pellucidum, fornix, your thalamus, your superior colliculi, inferior colliculi, cerebral peduncle, cerebral aqueduct, third ventricle, okay? And then you have the fourth ventricle, right? And then what else do we have here? The the arbor vitae is not very obvious here, so I wouldn't be asking that one. Okay, so this is the hypothalamus, and this is going to be the epithalamus. Okay, and then this is going to be the ventricles. Okay, so the lateral ventricles exactly has a superior and inferior horn. It's a lateral ventricle. So they connect into the third ventricle. The third ventricle is this one. That's actually the third ventricle. The connection between the lateral ventricle to the third ventricle is called the interventricular foramen. Interventricular, between the ventricles. Okay. And then the third ventricle connects now to this narrow tube called the cerebral aqueduct right there. That's the cerebral aqueduct. Okay. And the cerebral aqueduct then connects down into this square-looking ventricle called the fourth ventricle. That's your fourth ventricle. And then after the fourth ventricle, it becomes thin because it's now going to the spinal cord. And that's going to be the central canal of the spinal cord. Okay? So those are the different parts of the ventricles. Right? The middle part is the third ventricle. That's the third ventricle. The red part is going to be the fourth ventricle. And here is going to give you the different lobes of the brain. Okay, so it's the two cerebral hemispheres, actually. It didn't give you the different colors and different lobes. Okay, here is going to be just a simple summary of the cerebrum, the diencephalon, the midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, spinal cord, and your cerebellum. It has different colors. That gives you a good idea. And this gives you the ventricles that are associated with it. Okay. So on the right is ventricles associated with it. This picture is going to be the cerebellum. Okay. So this is going to be, so make sure that you know where's the anterior part. So your anterior part is right there. So I'm following the anterior part. That's your anterior part, okay? Because the temporal part is the one that you look like the muffins of the ear, okay? So this is going to be the precentral gyrus. So the question there is not the question of what is the structure. The question is, what does it do? Precentral is motor, okay? Now, same pictures, okay? As I said about the nervous system, always this part here. Corpus callosum, your fornix, septum pellucidum, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus. Then here's the third ventricle. Here's the cerebral aqueduct. This is going to be the superior colliculi of the corpora quadrigemini of the midbrain, inferior colliculi. This is cerebral peduncle of the midbrain, and then goes to the fourth ventricle. And that fourth ventricle has the pons, medulla oblongata, and the cerebellum. And the small lines here that are white, that is your arbor vitae. The white matter is called the arbor vitae. Right? Again, the same as just looking at the diencephalon here. Okay, again, looking at the diencephalon. Okay. Okay, so this part is going to be the. Okay, so I'm looking at the diencephalon. Okay, those are the thalamus. They're the thalamus. Okay, so this is what a diencephalon looks like. You got the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and it's associated with the cerebellum to the back. Okay, now this one, the red part there between the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe, that's going to be your insula. Okay, different color code for the different structure of the brain, so we exactly went through that. That's going to be the longitudinal fissure separating the two cerebral hemispheres. Now, this gives you about the lobes, okay? Frontal. Okay, so this is your frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal. Okay, so those are the different lobes. And then the gyrus, cingulate gyrus above the corpus callosum. Right, then this part is going to be the occipital lobe. Okay, this is part of the basal ganglia, which is going to be the putamen. Okay, and that's going to be the corpus striatum of the basal ganglia. And that's going to be the part of the midbrain they call the substantia nigra. That's where Parkinson's are actually having problems with. It's part of the midbrain. Okay, so again, important is the central sulcus, precentral, which is motor, postcentral, which is sensory. Okay, lateral, it's called lateral sulcus actually. Okay, so again, the same structures we actually went through. Okay, so don't have to go through them. And neuron, this is going to be the axon, the continuation of the neuron of the cell body, and this area where there's none of the myelin sheath, that's called the node of Van Veer. Now this is going to be the dendrites. Okay, these are the axons of different neurons. Okay, these are axons of different neurons. These are dendrites receiving information together with the cell body. Okay, and this is going to be the nucleus of the neuron. And you have the nucleolus inside. And these granules are called your Nissl bodies. Those are the granules. And then the start of the axon is called the axon HeLoc. This is important in physiology. This is where the action potential would start through. And this is going to be the axon. Okay, same structures we studied. Nodal Ranviers. Okay, the myelin sheath that covers the axon. Okay, and now the spinal cord. Okay, so just remember dorsal horn, ventral horn, lateral horn, the gray commissure, and the central canal. Okay, remember we know that who's anterior posterior by the sharp portion touching the edge as your posterior, what we call dorsal. Dorsal column, lateral column, ventral column. This is going to be the dorsal median sulcus, ventral median fissure. Okay, then we have the dura. Remember, this is not the dura. Okay, don't think that's the dura. This is the dura here. If that's the dura, this is going to be the arachnoid, and this is going to be the pia. Okay, just remember bone here. Then we have the dura, the arachnoid, and the pia. Then the brain is attached to the pia. So the space above here is going to be the epidural space. The space here subdural space. And this space here is the subarachnoid space. Okay, and this is going to be the dorsal root. This is sensory. It has the dorsal root ganglion. This is the ventral root. It is motor. And then after that, they meet here called the spinal nerve. This is spinal nerve. And then the spinal nerve divides into what we call the dorsal ramus and the ventral ramus. Remember, the spinal nerve, the dorsal ramus, and the ventral ramus all has motor and sensory. The only thing that's separated here is going to be the dorsal root and the ventral root. Okay. All right, and then we have the rami, the sympathetic chain ganglion connected by the ventral ramus called the rami communicantes. Okay, this is going to be part of the autonomic nervous system. All right, so we finished with that one. There's other models here that you can actually look at for the spinal cord. Okay, right, and this is going to be the brachial plexus. We're going to look at this when we go to the spinal nerves. Then this is going to be the cauda equina, horsetails, conus medullaris, the lumbar enlargement, and here's the cervical enlargement. Okay, so we'll take a look at that more on the plexus. Okay, so here is going to be, it was supposed to be a video, but it didn't actually push through. Okay, so, right, so that actually finished up your nervous system model. Okay, and I'm going to actually just go through a little bit on the cranial nerve. Cranial nerve is actually very simple. So I want to look at the cranial nerve summary. It only gives you an idea about the function it holds on the cranial nerve. Okay, and that's what we should be looking at here. Okay, let me reshare it. Okay, so I'm going to open my pen. Okay, so the cranial nerves. Okay, so you should be able to see my writing there. All right, so this is actually the holes where the cranial nerve passes through. Okay, cribriform plate where the foramen is located at. That's for cranial nerve 1. Cranial nerve 2, the optic. That's your optic canal. Cranial nerves 3, 4, 5, and 6, superior orbital fissure. And then these are just some of the branches of cranial nerve 5. Okay, but I'll focus more on the cranial nerves. Okay, so 6, cranial nerves 7 and 8. That's called the internal acoustic meatus. Then cranial nerves 9, 10, 11. Jugular foramen. And then cranial nerve 12. That's actually the canal located goes through the foramen magnum. That's called the hypoglossal canal. Okay, so we finished with that one. And these are the function. And remember the mnemonics, la, rasot, and o, in order to determine which cranial nerve innervates a specific kind of your eye. That's for cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6. And then, summary of the cranial nerves and identification of the cranial nerves. Okay, again, identification of cranial nerve. Okay, just remember it's like a clock. Okay, got 1 and 2, then 3 and 4 and 5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then 12. Okay, and this is actually everything that you have here is going to be the name of the cranial nerve, where is it located at, associated with, okay, and what hole do they go through, foramen, okay? And this is actually another mnemonic that you can use on Old Olympus, towering top of Finn, and German, bolted and hot, because I want you to know what is cranial nerve 1. So olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, and then you have the glossopharyngeal, that's 9, vagus, 10, 11, spinal accessory, and 12 is your hypoglossal nerve. Okay, so again, mnemonics, and association. It's a trick to memorization. Okay, all right. So we finished with our day today. Okay, we did cranial, neurocranial, and the CNS. And tomorrow we're going to be doing the PNS and spinal nerve together with the autonomic nervous system. And so I want you to answer the lab exercise, and just remember uh, the final the deadline is going to be the 15th for everything, such as all labs is going to close on the 15th. Okay, because the last year is 20th. So lab exercise are going to close on the 15th. Pre-test it's actually closing much earlier than that. So take a look at the due date, because once we finish the exam, there's no use for the pre-test anymore. And then also the research is going to be the finals. Is going to be the submission is going to be in the 15th. Okay, so take note of that, and I'll actually put up an announcement. So it's just a reminder for you to actually finish off all of those things. Okay.
Professor,
Yeah.
I had a question in regards to last test.
Mm-hmm.
I did have some issues when on the lab because some of the pictures weren't clear enough. Like you couldn't even see what you were pointing at, so you kind of had to like, I don't know, like squint or something or guess, because I felt like I couldn't even see. And then I know you gave us like 5 extra seconds, which thank you, but it took time to like load sometimes on the pictures. So it was kind of hard. I don't know if any other classmates had an issue, but I for sure did.
Okay, so I'll give you the option. I can give you a makeup test. But makeup test is going to be like 100 of those pictures.
Okay.
So if you're satisfied, with us, because you know, I just look at some of your answers there, okay? Because so what exam was that? The muscle?
Yeah, the lab.
Okay. Some people are thinking that the part of the body of that picture is actually the arm. It was the buttocks. So you're actually saying biceps brachii. Okay. So they actually noted also that they thought the thigh is the arm. So how can you actually make this mistake? Remember, I told you landmark, which is going to be the sartorius muscle. Mm-hmm. The only muscle that goes from lateral to medial is the sartorius. If you see that muscle, it's going to be impossible you could say it is your arm. And a lot of people said biceps brachii. That's actually the thigh. And that's one of the concerns I have, because when they look at it and they won't be able to actually identify which part of the body it is on a small part of the model, that concerns me. It's not going to be not because it's not clear, it's because they don't know what part of the body it is that I'm showing at. Okay.
Right. But
that's one of the things. Okay.
I think I understand like your point on the on that. But I feel like I don't know, like now that we keep practicing and stuff, like in real life we won't have only like 40 seconds to look at it. So but right there was sometimes when I would click on the questions, like it would just like take forever to load, and it was just like you got to do it quick, either you know it like type of thing or not. But it's just like some of the pictures weren't very clear when you would say, oh, on the like for number 20, and then you try to look at the number like which one's 20. Some of them were very blurry, like they would have like very blurry stuff. So I just I mean that was my point. But maybe I mean I'm okay, I guess, not doing another makeup, but maybe for like future lab exams, if you can, I mean, at least if the pictures can be more clear.
Okay. So did you notice the pictures were actually the one that you had on your study guide on your pretest?
Yes, I did notice that most of them were there.
Okay.
But sometimes they were more clear on, I felt like they were more clear on the pretest than. And then once again, like when we're doing the pretest, we do have more time. So I don't know, maybe it's because we get some nervous and stuff like that, or I don't know. I just personally, I felt like that.
Okay. Well, I understand, but remember, I told you the first thing that I don't expect you to be like my knowledge. So you won't be able to actually go at my level. But the point here is this: I'm actually trying to train you guys because remember, you're going to go back to anatomy when you go to the nursing field, and it's really hard to actually go through it again if you're not getting used to how I actually teach you. Because uh, I was hoping that that you can actually be able to actually get it when I actually show you the lab. And if that is going to be like hard, then I actually want you to keep on actually practicing. Okay, so
Right.
I'm hoping that this actually summer is really fast. Okay,
Yeah.
and
So
we
I just hope like for the next when you have some of them where it's just like you have it like 1, 2, 3, 4 like labeled like that, how you're
Mhm,
doing it right now about labeling also what we're learning right now on this next topic.
mhm.
The numbers are more clear because when you like there was one question where I can just like actually like that question just got me stuck where it said like what's the name of like number 20 or identified the where the number 20 was. And honestly, like it's just like even like 11, 12, 13 were so blurry, like really blurry to me that I couldn't even like tell what was 20. So it's kind of just like there was not even an arrow where like I could see where it's you're pointing at. It was just like the number.
Okay, so what I can do is I can give you a makeup exam, or we'll actually just do the improvement on the next exam in that case.
Okay, I'll just wait for the improvement. I mean,
Okay,
I wasn't
what's your
that
last name?
satisfied. Huh?
What's your last name?
Salinas?
Okay. All right. So I'll take a look at your results and actually tell you what were the concerns and problems then. Okay.
Thank
But
you, Professor.
so I'm gonna check if there were actually things there. But I'll actually explain to you what was the reason why you were having that problem. It could be blurry, but you know. One thing that you got to remember, okay, are you taking nursing?
Yeah.
Are you going to be a surgical nurse?
Well, I'm going for the labor and delivery. I work in the OBGYN department, so my goal is to become in labor and delivery. So
Okay. Do you know what a drape is?
a drape?
Yeah.
Yeah, like kind of like a gown. Is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about?
So when we do labor and delivery, we cover the patient with a drape. Do you know what it is?
Yes, I have children.
Yeah. So a drape is really when we do a surgical field, we cover that patient with a drape, and within that drape is a small hole.
Right, a sterile drape.
Yeah. So that small hole is the only thing that you see. You wouldn't even see the whole body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually in the surgical field. So if you're in that process of actually doing the OBGYN labor and delivery, and you actually are looking at a small hole in a cesarean section, would you be able to actually determine what kind of structure is there within that small hole? Like if I put it on the drape of a thigh, would you be able to say this is a thigh, not the arm? That's
Mm-hmm.
actually one of the concerns. One of the things that I want you to understand about that is actually be able to identify it even in a small structure
Right.
within that area of the drape. Okay, uh,
Okay.
I'm trying to actually train you guys because remember, uh, as much as I actually don't want to brag, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I always take a look at my students whenever they go to the nursing field. I know the students who actually get accepted in the nursing field. And every time they actually finish the nursing program, I look at their passing rate. Okay. And whenever I see that
Okay.
my students actually pass good, that means I did my job. Okay. And that's actually because they actually know what I'm looking at in the future. Like, for example, a drape is a small hole in which they only see a small portion of the structure in the human body. And then they actually have to determine landmarks. And that's actually what it
Right.
is. But I understand about the numbers. I think
Yeah, I don't know if you maybe want to
I
like
was on the
go. I
side.
I won't do the makeup test, but I just in the future
Yeah.
for the other test, if like before like posting it, maybe you want to like go over the pictures because there was one picture, and I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure you probably will find it. I forgot what number it was where
I
it
think it's
said
on
something
the
about
5.
20, and it was just really tough on me. Like, I don't know if other classmates had an issue, but I was like, where is 20? So I'm just like, I'm pretty sure like in real life, we're not going to have that kind of issue. Like you don't even know where 20 is.
Yeah. So it's gonna be very sure about that, but I know there's actually one of that. Okay. And
Thank you. I don't know if maybe you can give us that point.
well, that's gonna be how many points per are you looking at my canvas right now?
No, not right now. I'm looking through you through my
Okay.
Zoom, so no, I'm not.
Okay, so let me actually take a look. Okay. Let me analyze it, okay? Miscellaneous. If I gave you that point, okay, let me actually give you an example, okay? I'm not saying
Okay.
this is your grade. So let's say your grade is going to be, let's say your exam total grade is 91%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If I gave you that point, guess what is going to be the average of your exam? 91%. Let's say you have 91% right now. If I gave you that single point, your grade is going to be now 91.002.
Okay.
Okay, so I can still do that and then consider it, but it's not gonna do a breakthrough. Okay, so I just want you to know that if you actually
Okay.
have, because remember, there's gonna be 10 exams.
Right.
So 1 point out of that 10 exam is just gonna drown down to 0.001. Okay, if that was a big major thing like 10 points, well,
Mm-hmm.
actually, if your grade is 91, it's going to change to 91.5. Okay,
Right.
and that's how the grade system is. Okay,
Okay,
so
because I know that you said that you don't brown, so like practically every point counts, or am I wrong?
practicing what?
Every point counts, or am I wrong? Is that what you're saying, that even that point will make uh like anything? It won't change anything. Is that what you're
It,
saying?
it won't change anything. So I'll give you a sample on your exam on your grade. Okay, so I have a Excel spreadsheet that I can run down your grades, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'm gonna let you change the grade. That, like, for example, for that exam, you had probably 91%, and with that added point, let's say
Mm-hmm.
make it a 92%, and let's
Mm-hmm.
see what's the total average of your exam. It's not going to make that. Okay, it's
Okay.
not really something that will actually make the change. The only
Okay,
thing I'm
Professor.
telling you about your grades is uh, uh, your uh, your lab exercises and your pretest, they're given. So don't waste that. Okay.
Okay.
So you want to actually pull it up to about 90%. But if your average is like 70%, you're doing something wrong, because it'll pull your grade down if it's 70 compared to a 90%. But if you actually want to improve your grade from 97% to a 98%, it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to make that difference. Okay.
Okay.
But I'll still make that take a look at that. Okay. I know what that is. Number 6, I think.
Yeah, I don't really recall.
It's on the thigh. It
It
has
was a
numbers.
blur.
Yeah. Okay.
But just for like further, I really appreciate you gave us 5 more seconds, and then last time you gave us 10 seconds, after I brought up like 40 seconds and stuff. But just as long as like the pictures are clear,
Okay.
please.
Yeah. Well, I'll take that in consideration.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. So don't take for granted those lab exercises and those pretests. Okay. So I'm seeing a couple people who's not even doing the lab exercise. Okay. I'm seeing a couple people not doing the lab exercise because I'm going to give you a reminder that this will close. And then uh, uh, from my previous class, what they did was, Professor, can you open the lab exercise? I can't because that's a quiz. Can you open the pretest? And it said, today's already 2 days before the final exam. So I want you to concentrate on your final exam. Excuse me. So I want you not to procrastinate, okay? I'm seeing a couple of people here that are not doing the lab exercise. And I'm seeing a couple of people here that are not, they probably are anticipating that they will go back and do the pre-test, but do this as much as early as possible, okay? So spend your time right now to that lab exercise, okay?
For
All right.
the research paper, Professor, will you be posting the topics that we're gonna be talking about? Because that's what it said on the syllabus. It said that we would talk about it during the class about like what topics we can all focus on and what to
No,
choose.
I was actually talking about that. What is about the research? So underneath that, okay. So let me actually check it out if it's in there. There should be an explanation, an outline on how the research is done, and then there
Right.
should be a sample there. Okay, so I'm gonna put it in, and there's gonna be a video of me explaining how the research is done. But we're gonna talk about that like tomorrow. And
Okay.
we're gonna spend time and take a look at this research. But I'm gonna put a lot of this things information there so you can do the research. I'm not asking you to do the topic that I want you to do. It's
Okay.
yours. The topic that
Okay.
you want to do is something that you're interested on. Okay.
Okay.
I just want you to actually focus on the disease, because remember, if you talk about arthritis, there's actually different arthritis. So you want to be specific. You can talk about all of the arthritis, but you concentrate on the epidemiology of like rheumatoid. So
Mm-hmm.
choose rheumatoid. Don't go choose gouty arthritis, septic arthritis, because there's actually a wide range of that disease, arthritis. So focus on one disease. Okay. So if you
Okay.
talk about pneumonia, focus on viral pneumonia, okay,
Okay.
not general pneumonia, okay? So we'll talk about that again tomorrow, okay? And I'll put
Tomorrow.
the information in the research.
And you also put how many pages need to be in and stuff like that.
I'm not asking for pages, just actually asking for a PowerPoint, about 15 slides, that's all.
Right. Oh, that's right.
And you'll actually see that I want you to be brief, not long, okay? So it's not something that I want you to submit as a research paper. It's just a presentation, considering the fact that you might actually be asked to do a seminar for diabetic people because you're a nurse. So when you do the seminar, you want to actually know what to say. And that's actually the guideline I'm going to put here for the research.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. All right. So again, I'll see you again tomorrow, and we'll talk more about that research, and we'll try to actually get a little bit of review for the nervous system. Okay, that's the only last hard part is going to be the nervous system. After that, the cardiovascular, the other parts, the digestive, they're just easy topics. Okay.
Professor, and the research video will be posted tonight?
Yeah, the research video, what I actually are going to put on the research.
Okay, thank you. And that'll be great if we can get a pretest also tonight or tomorrow latest.
No, I'll put everything tonight.
Okay,
Pretest,
thank you.
the video, and the video for tonight. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll see you guys. Have a nice day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. I'll post the lab exercise 11 and 12 research.